Rise and shine. This is your morning Buzzcast for Thursday, April 24th. I'm Austin Karp, wrapping up our CAA World Congress of Sports from Nashville this year. I'm joined by my colleagues, Chris Smith, Rachel Axon. We want to talk about this final day on Wednesday, day 2. We wrapped up with some great sessions, some owners, key sports business executives. Chris, I want to start with you. What was the big thing that stood out for you from day 2?
So much, Austin. I mean, it's tough for me to pick out a single highlight. Another packed day in Nashville yesterday. I think one thing that really stood out to me, though, was Michael Klein. I mean, this is one of the preeminent deal makers in the world. This is a guy who is a trusted advisor to foreign nations, sovereign wealth funds. The Saudis are leaning on him to figure out what they're doing in the United States and elsewhere. And he really went deep. Surprised me on how much data he was pulling out. Just very articulate, very thoughtful, walking through the scale of the sports industry, right? I mean, talking about how if you took the NFL all together, that whole business, it would be the 8th largest company in America. That's not something I ever think about, right? Or at least not in that framework. Talking about how media rights deals and how insulated they are and how important they are, that it's almost a safer investment than treasury bonds, right? Yeah. And it's like that idea, and using that as an explanation for why he's still so bullish on sports and on why the sports industry is so massive, and what we've seen in terms of institutional capital and other ways that investors are coming in is still just scratching the surface, right? This is just the very beginning of what we're starting to see in terms of the continued maturity of sports as an asset class. And so I was just riveted by listening to Klein talk about this industry.
You're so right. Nobody really thinks about a league as like this singular entity. I mean, maybe it was a couple of years ago, Bain Capital kind of put a valuation like, hey, maybe we can buy all of the NHL for a few $1 billion. Maybe I think that's like the price of one of the marquee franchises now. So very good decision by Gary Bettman and co. not to do that. But yes, very interesting to think about the power, the reach, the value of the NFL. Rachel, day 2, what stood out to you?
A few things. I'll go to my panel. We had a diverse group of people from across the industry. And one of the themes that really came out of there was opportunities in events and thinking differently about how they're doing things. They pointed to some of the things. Derek Schiller, obviously the Atlanta Braves are going to be hosting the All-Star game, but also participating in, the game at Bristol Motor Speedway. Jordan Bazant from Fox talking about some of the stuff they've been doing in collegiate sports, the Crown and college basketball, thinking about, what are new events, new products, new things that they can do to bring to their fan bases, to grow those fan bases, and then also how to leverage some of the opportunities they already have, right? Ian Iyer from Nashville SC was on the panel, and they're hosting, venue is hosting in the FIFA Club World Cup. Obviously, the Men's World Cup coming here next year, and those are two events, in their sport that they're looking to leverage. So a lot of focus on growth and opportunity, I think, from that discussion.
I got to give a lot of credit to Jordan Bazant, Fox, AEG, the 3 conferences that put on that Crown basketball tournament. I had Jordan on a panel in Vegas as the ideas were still coming together. It was around our college conference. And I didn't know how it was going to perform, particularly on TV. I'm always paying attention to the numbers. And this final drew close to 1 million viewers on Fox, easily 2-3x what the final for something like the NIT was able to draw. And you didn't really have marquee names participating in that final. A lot of schools in the participating conferences didn't do it in year 1. Maybe they look at the number and be like, okay, this is something we can do. It's like with Drive to Survive. You didn't have some of the big marquee names participating in season 1. Then like, okay, we see what this is. Now we can be part of it. We see the exposure. We see the value. So people doing innovative things. I love what Fox, AEG, and those conferences did with the Crown.
Yeah. What stood out to you, Austin?
That panel that, Chris, that you moderated, like you were talking about with Doc and Klein and with David Blitzer, wow. They just covered the gamut on a whole bunch of issues that are so important to the sports industry right now. Just talking about things that are undervalued, things that they have their eye on. And this is what people need to be paying attention to, where people like that with the money are putting their investments, what they think are undervalued, what they think might be overvalued, or at least we'll pause right now, and that's not something where we're going to park our money. So those are the voices that I always love to hear at our events, because those are driving the dollars in sports.
I couldn't agree more, Austin. I mean, that panel was so much fun for me to do. It was frankly a little stressful for me to do because I had so many more questions than I had time to get through. And so I was trying to rush them through as much as I could, and they covered so much ground. A few other things that stood out to me: women's sports, right? Michael Klein, David Blitzer talking about how early innings they're still and the growth they see ahead. Another thing that really stood out to me was MLB, right? Baseball investments. Doc O'Connor, David Blitzer saying it is the most undervalued league right now among the major leagues in the U.S. Not the most valuable league, but the most undervalued league. And that, the current challenges MLB is facing, and there are plenty, they see as opportunities, right? They see baseball having a lot of smart people in the room. They have a very clear idea of where they're going, and that this is a moment in time where it's a good time to buy. And you're seeing them both get involved. Obviously,
It seems
Blitzer.
counterintuitive just based on like all the issues you're talking about with baseball, whether it's from the media side, from figuring out the market side, like is Tampa Bay going to stick around? Like what are we doing? Where can we potentially go to expansion? We're in Nashville. That's been at the top of the list in terms of MLB expansion.
To what you were saying, Chris, women's sports a particular focus for me. We're launching a women's sports newsletter, expanding our coverage, and to hear what they were saying about the opportunities there. And I think that was, that was a great concentration of this discussion. But I noticed in several panels throughout all of World Congress where emerging leagues, emerging sports, TGL, we were talking about on day one, where there's a lot of excitement, opportunity, sometimes hesitation. I think during the panel they brought up, track. That's a sport that every 4 years on the beat I'm on in the Olympics gets a lot of attention. Do we need multiple track leagues? How do those consolidate? And so I think there's a lot of excitement about the growth of the industry, some of the new leagues coming on, and then some questions, to your point, hesitation about which ones are sustainable. How does this work?
David Blitzer, it was interesting to me, basically came out and said it. And I think it's the thing that, the unspoken, not so secret that a lot of these emerging leagues might not work out, right? And that's okay, right? And taking more of a venture growth investment approach to them. So we see Blitzer and these other investors taking, a widespread approach, right? Putting capital behind a bunch of different opportunities, these growth leagues. And we're seeing so much excitement. I mean, how much chatter was there? Rachel, you mentioned TGL, right? Huge crowd in the room to see what Mike McCarley is building along with some of the investors there and Raz Durant from ESPN. And excitement about where that could go and where some of these other challenger and disrupting leagues can take the industry.
And not just on stage and in that ballroom. I just feel like the TGL was a topic of conversation in the hallways, in the green room. Everyone's kind of just trying to see like, all right, like year one, there's some potential there. The numbers were pretty good. They were above the expectations for ESPN and the TGL. But what is the future like? What's the next iteration of it? Alexis Ohanian all but gave us the answer to what the future might be on stage. Is that a women's league? Is that something with the LPGA? But beyond that, how can they get maybe celebrities involved? I'll tell you what I would watch. I'd watch Steph Curry take on Caitlin Clark in a TGL match. That is something that I would tune into. I think that's, as a sports fan, that's something fun. That's long-term, just something, that's at the fringes. Okay, but you keep some of these top golfers involved. And if you can one day, you give me LIV versus PGA Tour players on the TGL, yeah, that's something I'm watching as well, and that would really help the audience growth. All right, we had a day and a half of content, a bunch of panels, bunch of discussions that all of us had. Rachel, I'm going to start with you. What is your biggest takeaway from World Congress of Sports?
I think the optimism, to be honest, when we were coming in and preparing for this event, there was a lot of discussion about the economy and how changing the situations with tariffs and potential recession, how those may all impact the industry. And I don't think that it's not a concern, right? That's come up a few times. And I think it is kind of in everybody's mind to see the impact that may have, however that plays out. But the optimism about the growth, the expansion, trying new things, new opportunities, overarching, I think, through every panel, whether it was these new emerging leagues and properties that we've been talking about or MLB, it just, I think, permeated most of the discussions I was able to sit in on.
I couldn't agree more. And Austin, I hate to just repeat what Rachel had to say, but it stood out to me. I came into this event wanting to figure out where are the concerns. And there are some, right? Ticket sales, sponsorships. We know that if we do continue into a recessionary period, there will be pain, right? A lot of these operators are going to have to re-strategize their businesses a little bit. But just, sheer optimism, right? It was incredible how much people believe in the future value of this industry and the future upside, right? That we're nowhere close to maxing out what we can do within sports and sports business. And so I frankly found it incredibly energizing as I look ahead to the rest of this year and beyond. Couldn't be more excited to see what comes next. If it is a lot of economic headwinds, curious and fascinated to see how we do indeed kind of weather that next storm.
I think that's something that the sports industry, though, is used to at this point. So many people, they went through the 2007, 2008, 2009 crisis. They went through COVID. They have dealt with things like this, and they know that sports is going to thrive and survive in the long term. And yes, there is a little erratic nature to what the administration is doing with the stock market in particular. It's less of a roller coaster and more like watching somebody having a heart attack on an EKG machine. But they know that sports is going to be there. It's not going anywhere. That's why they're continuing to invest and why there is continued optimism.
I think if I were to add to that, another theme would be in the storytelling, right? In the discussion that I had on day 2, Kristen Corio at USTA, Derek Schiller at the Braves were talking about the type of content, storytelling, digital reach that they have to focus on, because you have such a broader base than is ever going to walk through the gates at your ballpark, at Arthur Ashe or any other venue. The ones who are doing well are extending that reach, using storytelling to get the buy-in, get the investment to create new fans, and that's something that they can do, somewhat independent of those gate receipts and attendance. And I think that's not just those two, that's across the industry.
Well, we thank our sponsor for this event, CAA, for putting on another fantastic World Congress of Sports. Thank you to all of our sponsors, all of our attendees, all of our panelists, all the people that work at SBJ. A great event, first time here in Nashville. I'm going to do a little plug here for this week's SBJ Sports Media podcast. Tonight, first round of the NFL Draft. We talked to Charlie Uke, the executive producer of the draft on NFL Network. Also, we're talking to Katie Griggs, president of business operation for the Orioles. Big news coming out of that Masson deal in market streaming earlier this week. So, for Chris Smith, Rachel Axon, I'm Austin Karp. This has been your morning Buzzcast for Thursday, April 24th. Hope everybody has a fantastic end to the week. Make good choices out there. We will talk to you all again soon.